What if I told you the biggest hit of their career was a song a rock legend told them would destroy them? They won a major award over Nirvana at the absolute peak of grunge, only to be tossed aside by the American music industry. They practically vanished in the States, but found themselves playing to 40,000 screaming fans in a sold-out stadium on the other side of the world. Here's how FireHouse got the last laugh even when it felt like they were losing.
Like, subscribe. Thank you.
So you got this guitarist, Bill Loverty, and he's got a band called White Heat back in the mid-'80s. He's got a drummer, Michael Foster, who he found after putting something like 20 other guys through the ringer. They were solid, but they needed that front man, that voice. They're kicking around Virginia when they saw this other band, Max Warrior. Max Warrior had this singer with insane pipes named CJ Snare, and a rock-solid bass player, Perry Richardson. So Leverty and Foster knew that was the sound. So when Max Warrior eventually fizzled out, the call was made. Leverty sent Snare some of his demos, and CJ just ripped into them. They booked a gig, and the four of them hit the stage, and it was instant. CJ walked off stage and told Bill, "This is the right band for me." Bill knew it too. This was the lineup. They just needed a break. They moved the whole operation to Charlotte, North Carolina, woodshedding in Leverty's bedroom, writing songs, and honing their sound. They were still called White Heat, but that name was trademarked, so they had to ditch it. It was Foster who threw out the name FireHouse, and it stuck. They grinded it out playing shows, sending out demos. One of those demos landed in the hands of Dana Strum and Mark Slaughter, who were putting their own band, Slaughter, together, who I covered in detail some videos back. They helped FireHouse guys produce a proper demo in a big LA studio. And finally, in December of 1989, a guy from Epic Records named Michael Kaplan came down to Charlotte to see him play live. He didn't even wait. He saw the show and basically offered them a contract right on the spot. This was it, the big leagues. They were paired with producer David Prater, and it was time to make a record. And the timing was weird. It was 1990. Sunset Strip Party was technically still raging, with bands in leather and spandex dominating MTV. This was the world of hair metal, a scene built on big hooks, bigger hair, and videos that looked like a party you never get invited to. FireHouse fit right in there. The sound was heavy enough for the headbangers, but also had these massive radio pop-friendly choruses. Their first single, Shake and Tumble, did okay on rock radio, but didn't quite cross over. Then came Don't Treat Me Bad, and that one friggin' exploded. Shot up the charts, hitting number 14. The video was everywhere. They were on their way. They had the look, the sound, and now they had a genuine hit. But every band in that era needed a power ballad, and that was a real ticket to the top. You know, that song that would get played at proms and weddings for the next 30 years. FireHouse had one, a song called Midnight Fantasy, but the label just wasn't feeling it. They told the band it wasn't strong enough and even suggested bringing in some outside writers to help them craft a hit. But this is where the story gets insane. CJ Snare, feeling the pressure, reluctantly raises his hand. He tells him he's got this other song. The band had heard it, but they shelved it. Why? Because a little earlier they had gotten some advice from John Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi heard the song and, according to CJ, told him to flat out throw it away. Said it would ruin their career. Absolute piece of junk. So they listened. They buried this song. But now, with the whole label breathing down their necks, CJ brings it back out, against John Bon Jovi's advice. He had written the song years before FireHouse was even a thing, sitting alone in a Holiday Inn lounge after playing a solo gig. And it was a song about pure, unwavering devotion, even though he hadn't found that person himself yet. So he plays it for the label. The song was Love of a Lifetime. And Epic friggin' freaked. They knew immediately that was the friggin' hit right there. It was released and it became a monster. Soared to number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was the wedding song of 1991. CJ wrote it by himself, but due to a kind of Lennon-McCartney arrangement the band had, the credit was shared with Bill Loverty. It didn't matter. CJ got a 6-figure royalty check for a single month from that one song. It didn't ruin their career, it made it. And their debut album went double platinum. They were selling millions of records. And then came the award season. The 1992 American Music Awards, they were nominated for Favorite New Heavy Metal Hard Rock Artist. And look at who they were up against. Alice in Chains, Nirvana. By January of 92, Nirvana's Nevermind had knocked Michael Jackson out of the number 1 album slot. Smells Like Teen Spirit was friggin' huge, and the entire music industry was being turned on its head. The fun-loving, polished excess of hair metal was suddenly cringe. Flannel angst and sludgy guitars were all in, and in the middle of this hostile takeover, FireHouse, a band that represented everything grunge was rebelling against, and they won the award. They beat Nirvana. It was surreal, almost an unbelievable moment. It was also, in many ways, the beginning of the end for them in the US. They went back in the studio to record their second album, Hold Your Fire, which came out later in '92. By then, the sea change was complete. The album still went gold, which is a big accomplishment, but it was a far cry from the double platinum success of the debut. They had a great rock single with Reach for the Sky, but their biggest success from that record was another ballad, When I Look Into Your Eyes. It was a beautiful song, a classic of that era, climbed all the way to number 8 on the charts, proved that they could still write a massive hit, but the ground beneath their feet was disappearing. The rock world that had crowned them just a year before was now actively hostile to their very existence. CJ would later make the grim observation that the three singers from the AMA category, himself, Kurt Cobain, and Lane Staley, at that point he was the only one left. It was a dark, ironic twist on a moment that should have been a career peak. By '95, most bands from their scene were either broken up, trying to sound like Soundgarden, or playing the half-empty clubs. FireHouse refused to change. They released their third album, simply titled 3. The lead single was another power ballad, I Live My Life For You. In a world dominated by alternative rock, the song defied all odds. It climbed to number 26 on the charts, to be the last top 40 hit that any band from the hair metal genre would score in the US. Final defiant stand. But after that, America was done. Epic Records, the label that had signed them in a frenzy, seemed to lose all interest in promoting them. And after 8 years, the band asked to be let go from their contract. For most bands, that'd be a death knell, a quiet fade into obscurity, playing the state fair circuit for the rest of their days. But FireHouse wasn't most bands. While their star was plummeting in the US, something else was happening. Their music was finding a massive, passionate audience overseas. Their third album, the one that barely made a dent at home, certified gold in several Asian countries. They signed a new record deal with a Japanese label, Pony Canyon, and started touring places their peers would never dream of, playing sold-out shows in Thailand, Indonesia, Japan. They were superstars on the other side of the planet. The contrast was jarring. One month they'd be playing in a club in the Midwest, and the next they'd be headlining a festival for tens of thousands of people in South America. They had a whole second life that most of their American fans knew nothing about. But the road took its toll. Around 2000, the band parted ways with their original bass player, Perry Richardson. The official line was personal conflict, and it was a blow to the classic lineup that had achieved so much. Years later, Richardson would explain that he was just trying to push the band's sound forward, to evolve, but the others wanted to stick to the classic FireHouse formula. They were butting heads, and he decided to move on. He was replaced by a phenomenal bass player, Bruce Weibel, who played with the Greg Allman Band. He toured with them and played on their 2000 album O2, but after a long tour, Weibel decided to leave and spend more time with his family. And tragically, in September 2003, Bruce died, and it turned out it was on his own volition. Absolutely devastating loss. The band brought in another bass player, Brazilian musician named Dario Ciexas, for a brief stint, but he also left. It felt like the band was in a constant state of flux. Finally, in 2004, they found their man in Alan McKenzie, who had held the position ever since. Just a few months after McKenzie joined, the band did something that cemented their strange, incredible international legacy. In December 2004, they became the first major international rock band to play in Northeast India. They were invited, and their first show in the city of Shillong was in a stadium packed with over 40,000 fans, set a record for the city. Here was a band that was a footnote from a bygone era in their home country, and they were setting attendance records in India. And they just kept going, releasing albums, touring the world, playing their hearts out for the fans who stuck with them no matter where they were. For years, they continued this way. Steady working-class rock band with a platinum-plated history. They toured with their peers on the Rock Never Stop circuit, and the summers playing the nostalgic crowds in America, and then would fly off to Europe or Asia to play to these massive audiences who treated them like rock gods. They released a new album in 2011. 4 members, CJ, Bill, Michael, and Alan, were a tight, road-tested unit. But in 2023, the news came that CJ Snare would be taking a hiatus from the road. He was having health issues. A young singer named Nate Peck, who had been a contestant on American Idol, was brought in to fill his massive shoes. The hope was that CJ would recover and return to the stage, but on April 5th, 2024, CJ Snare passed away at the age of 64. The voice behind A Love of a Lifetime, Don't Treat Me Bad, was gone. And the outpouring of grief from fans and fellow musicians was immense. Perry Richardson, the bass player he'd started out with in Max Warrior, said the news just devastated him. It was the end of an era. The band, with CJ's blessing before he passed, made the decision to carry on. A month after his death, they officially announced Nate Peck as their new frontman. dedicated to honoring CJ's legacy every night. They continued to tour, a band that had outlasted the genre that birthed them, survived the tidal wave that should have drowned them, built a global career on the sheer refusal to ever give up. That's FireHouse for you. Road tested and still rocking.